hang out with you this morning for the next hour or so. We are going to spend today having a critical dialogue about supervised assessment, about what we know, what we've learned, and possibly what we're still learning in this space, about how we create that relational human dimension of real-time assessment, and how teaching staff can really create conditions where students can demonstrate their learning but also do their best. We will hear from a panel of wonderful colleagues from across the university footprint who've been practicing in this space about, their insights, their stories, and their strategies. And this is all about building this community, but also supporting this community and inspiring this community, especially those who are probably stepping into this space for the first time. So before we deep dive into who our panelists are, I would like to acknowledge country. So I'm coming to you this morning from Biripi country here in Port Macquarie. I want to pay my respects to Biripi elders past and present. I also acknowledge with deep respect the traditional custodians of the many lands that we are on as a communities, and I welcome you to put that acknowledgement in the chat if you feel comfortable. I extend that respect to First Nations colleagues in this meeting today as well. So let's go to see who our panelists are. We've got actually a representation from across the university footprint. So I'll just do a brief introduction and then we can jump into the panel discussion. So as I mentioned, we brought together this panel, 4 experienced colleagues from across the university footprint who bring these diverse perspectives and experiences to us. They will share a little bit of what they've tried, what works for them, what they've learned in this space, and also potentially what they're still learning and where they'd like to take their practice to as assessors. So we have with us Associate Professor Emma Colvin from the Centre of Law and Justice. Thank you, Emma, for being here. We have Karen Davidson from the Division of Student Success. Welcome, Karen, and thank you for being with us this morning. We have Dr. Belinda Downey from the School of Education. Thank you, Belinda, for bringing the arts and ed lens into this conversation. And of course, last but not least, Dr. Marissa Olson from the School of Allied Health, Exercise and Sports Science, who's bringing that Faculty of Science and Health perspective. So thank you to our panel for spending this time with us, for sharing your story. I look forward to hearing more about your practice and learning really from what you've done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see everyone on the screen, and we will launch into our discussion. And it's lovely to see some great welcomes and acknowledgements in the chat. I'm just keeping an eye on the chat. Another reminder as well that we can use the chat for informal conversation, but if there is a specific question that you want to put forward to the panel, please put it into the Q&A function, because I will go into that at the discussion time and I will draw out some questions from there and present it to the panel. And if you're still in the audience at that time, I will probably ask you to come off mute, put your camera on and ask the question yourself. So chat first is where I'll go for the questions. So let's get started. So to get us started, I think the best thing we need to do is to understand who our panelists and how long they've been in this space and kind of how they've entered into this space and why it matters to them. So I might go to Emma first. Emma, can you tell me a little bit about your supervised assessment context, like your discipline, subject, your students, and how long you've been in this space? And I also would like to maybe hear from you about what prompted you to initially get started in that oral assessment as a methodology.
Thanks, Kashila. So yeah, as said, I'm in the Centre for Law and Justice, and I've been doing interactive orals as supervised assessment for almost 4 years now. So it's been a while. I originally started out doing it in a subject that was the capstone for our Indigenous Cultural Competency subject. And really, I think it was all written assessment in that subject. And I think oral assessment really fitted the nature of that subject well, doing reflective work. So that was the original reason. Of course, now we've moved into an era of generative AI, and we're more closely looking at how we can do secure assessment as well, or more secure assessment. And what's interesting is I teach across the Bachelor of Laws, but also the Bachelor of Criminal Justice, which has just been revised into the Bachelor of Criminology. In our law program, we've now actually, as an accreditation requirement, we have to have 50% secure assessment in our core subjects. So even more so, we're putting those in. So I've put interactive orals in a range of subjects over the last 4 years. In fact, every subject I've taught, I've had an interactive oral in, because I really love them. So currently in our law program, I teach criminal law and criminal procedure. In criminal law, we've now got 2 interactive orals of 25% to make 50%. And they're sort of interactions with a practitioner about whether or not you can construe the elements of an offence. And there's one on murder and there's one on assault and property offences. In criminal procedure, we have an oral bail application. So the marker is the magistrate, and you actually have to try and see if you can get bail for your client. And in criminal justice, I do the first year foundational subject, and we have like a 2-part assessment. One is a written assessment, which is a ministerial briefing on a matter of law reform. And after you've written that briefing, you then have to go to the minister and have a 10-minute meeting with the minister, where they get to ask more questions and say, what should we do in relation to law reform? Should we go ahead? Should we change it? And that's sort of, about scaffolding into putting in an educated opinion to a law reform issue. So that's what we do. We've got a range of students, big subjects of maybe 100, well, big, medium subjects, but yeah, that's who we are.
Wonderful, Emma. So creative, but also so much about bringing that professional relevance into your assessment. Like it ticks a lot of boxes. So it's so interesting to hear what you're doing in your space. I might go to Marissa next. Marissa, what's your supervised assessment context, and how long have you been in this space, and what kind of prompted you to join this party?
Thanks, Sheila, and thanks for having me. My colleague Ruth Crawford was the person who prompted me to join a little community of practice that was happening with Amita Krautlau, who is pretty much considered, I think, at CSU as the guru of interactive oral assessment. And we were interested, similarly to Emma, because we had a lot of written assessments at the time. So that was in 2021. So well before we were worrying even about, I don't think, no, we weren't really worrying about Gen AI and things like that at that point, but we certainly wanted to see what sort of assessment items we could use to facilitate some deeper reflections for our students. So particularly relevant in getting an understanding of where students were at in their understanding of things like scope of practice, particularly around nutrition, where we're often teaching students who aren't going to become nutrition professionals specifically. So they have certain things they have to do around nutrition, but it's not necessarily their whole role. So that can be quite nuanced. So we found that the interactive orals did give us that opportunity to just sort of dig a little bit deeper. Sorry, here comes my cat.
Obviously loves
naughty,
supervised assessment.
She's my supervisor. She's a naughty girl. So we're conducting them in, I think we started off small, of course, but I tried to count them. We've got at least 5 subjects by next session that we'll be doing interactive oral assessments in. And I think I agree with Emma. You fall in love with them. You see the value of them as you become more confident doing them. You can see where they can fit and how you can scaffold them to help students to do well in them, but also to develop, show the learning that they've been developing over time. And I'm excited about implementing them in a subject next session, where I'm actually going to be getting students to, still thinking it through, but getting students to use some AI in the public health nutrition space, and then having an interactive oral at the end to really dig down into not just public health and nutrition processes, but also how does the use of AI, you know, what are the pros and cons of using AI in our practice? So yeah, so I think it's got a lot of potential in helping students to demonstrate their learning.
Oh, wonderful. So excited to hear how you'll go in this space, and maybe have you back at some point, both of you again, to share, you know, how that experiment's gone. And I think, you know, you're absolutely right. Like, this is a space in which all AI can coexist, right, with assurance of learning. And I think that's what you're pointing out here, and how, in fact, we can use the oral supervised assessment to really draw out that better cognitive reflection around how we brought AI into our practice and what that means for us professionally. So that's a fantastic example, Marissa. Belinda, I'll go to you next. What's happening in the School of Education? When did you enter this space? And, you know, what prompted you to engage with oral assessments?
Thank you. So I started in the interactive oral assessment space in 2024, I think it was. So I teach predominantly into the Bachelor of Education Birth to 5, which is a pathway course. So students who enter that have come through, typically the majority have come through vet pathway. So they've got a diploma in early childhood education and care, and they're wanting to upskill to a Bachelor of Education. It's a large cohort, so usually a large cohort for us, it's about 180 students in the first subject. And we had the retention team working with us because it was identified that we had a lot of attrition in the first two subjects in that course. So wellness and wellbeing was the subject I taught. It's the first subject. We've got it set up with all sorts of things to help transition them to university and with academic writing. What we identify within that cohort is that typically they're middle age, like 34 average age. They're not school leavers. They're typically working and they're trying to support families and stuff. Almost 99% women. And what we identified was they don't have low literacy, but they have low academic literacy. And so for the first subject, it was hard for them to get through when it was all written assessments. We also have a large called student backgrounds, and many who actually had a called background but didn't identify that they had a called background as well. So even though the statistics didn't appear like we had a huge range, there were a lot of students that were, you know, English as a second language or third language. And so for them, you know, sometimes the grammar and everything we found was a little bit tricky as well. And so, yeah, it just was something that was suggested to me as a way to, you know, equitable, universal design of learning that could work for these students. And I was a bit scared with 180 students. I was like, how am I going to do this? And predominantly I tend to have about 7 sessionals marking with me. And so that was really scary. How was I going to manage, you know, large sessional marking loads and so many students? But it has been amazing. And I love it. And I tried to introduce it. I want to introduce it into other subjects. And a lot of my colleagues were moving towards that when they heard about what it was, what it looked like. And I think because early childhood and education as such is so, like, it is so relationship focused, it is a lot of conversations and having to talk. It just seemed to fit really nicely with what we do on a day-to-day basis anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And I think you've brought forward those equity considerations as well in the choice of the assessments, the decisions that we make around our assessment regime. So that's a wonderful example, Belinda. Thank you. Karen, I'll move to you next. Karen, your role is quite different to the other panelists. So can you tell us a little bit about your role and kind of how the lens that you have in this assessment space?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I work in academic skills, coordinating the support in the Faculty of Science and Health. Largely, I scaffold the academic skills in studying and assessments for students, but our team also supports students on an individual basis according to what concerns they might have with assessment tasks and Also foundational skills related to their study, such as reading, writing, referencing, maths and communication skills, that kind of thing. I think the first time I can't remember how many years ago, a few years ago now, I started working with some lecturers that were using supervised assessment, mostly teaching classes and producing videos, I think mostly in nursing and radiography, to make sure that we scaffold what sorts of preparation students can do towards feeling a bit more confident to achieve as well as they can in these type of assessments.
Wonderful. So we're going to unpack that a little bit more in our questions, Karen. So I look forward to your thoughts with that lens. So let me go to my next question. So we know that the relational quality of supervised oral assessments, you know, that encounter matters enormously. It kind of sets the scene for the student to, as you say, demonstrate their learning and also, you know, to do their best, right? So I want to go to you, Marissa. Can you walk us through the first couple of minutes when a student arrives or logs on? Yeah, I don't know whether you're doing this online or face to face, but you know, in those first couple of minutes, what actions do you take to settle students in, and what do you find makes a difference in those kind of opening moments to really set the scene?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we do them online. So I think it can be challenging, especially when you've never met the student before. And that is a sort of a double-edged sword in some ways, because if they've never engaged with you or spoken to you, that can be very, it's sort of like a cold meeting. But at the same time, I actually find that to be one of the biggest benefits of the interactive oral assessment in an online subject, because you do get to meet each student and you do get to get that sort of that connection with them. So I just wanted to make that point, that, you know, it's a really lovely way of getting to know your students. And I think while we're talking, I will get to the first few minutes, but I think what also happens in the lead up is really important as well. That again, there are times when you meet the student for the first time in the actual session, but there's a lot you can do to demonstrate warmth and connection and build that relationship in the lead up to doing the interactive orals. So, you know, creating that space where you're demonstrating that students are welcome to, I guess, speak their minds and talk and share their opinions and ideas. One of the subjects that I do this in is the sociology of nutrition subject. So we talk about, why do people eat what they eat? So, you know, that, you know, it sounds obvious, but it can actually be quite a fraught subject to talk about. You know, things like trauma, privilege, races, you know, like there's so much discrimination. A lot of that stuff comes up in our tutorials. And so I think it's demonstrating that you handle those sort of things sensitively and with warmth and kindness makes a big difference before they come in. But in terms of what I do in at the actual time, a warm-up chat's really important. How's your day been going? Oh, it's so lovely to meet you. You know, have a bit of a joke about, oh, that's what you look like, sort of thing. Or, you know, just that sort of warmth and you being relaxed, you being excited to talk to them, asking if there's anything you can do to make them more comfortable, asking if they understand the process, because often the student hasn't done something like this before and they are a little anxious, and just telling them when they're going to get their marks or their feedback as well can help them sort of relax a bit, and just reassuring them that we can pause if they need. You know, it is a conversation. It's not like a viva voce or a formal presentation. It's going to be a little bit more relaxed and a bit more to and fro.
Wonderful.
Yes, I do that before I start recording. Yeah.
So that the warm-up happens then. And thank you for that point as well, that the lead up, the pre, is as important as those opening moments and what happens through that interaction. Belinda, can I go to you next and get your perspective on how do you settle students in? What do you do?
And same, exactly what Marissa said, the lead up's important as well. I often, our students are all online and distance, and so we do a lot of work building up to the assignment, where we break into breakout rooms and things like that, and they practice it. They've obviously gotten used to me teaching, which is a good thing as well, so that some of them do feel familiar with me. And yeah, they do have some of the sessionals as well, and we bring them into one of the online classes, tutorials, workshops before the assessment, so they can say hi. If the sessional markers or casual markers can't come into the lecture, I get them to do a little video, like a minute. Hi, my name is, this is my background, you know, this is, so again, that warmth, like Marissa was saying, is really important. Telling them that we're aware, you know, that they're nervous, and yeah, when they join, it's normally, hi, how are you? How are you feeling? You know, it's normal to be nervous, don't worry. You know, everyone does this, but you know, it'll fly past, you'll feel okay. And yeah, is there any questions? Is there anything you're not sure about? Have a read. And even like the wording sometimes might confuse them. So it's like, just have a read, and then we can ask any questions before we start. Yeah, we sort of say to them, try and choose a time, because they're all working and stuff, try and choose a time where it will be quieter for you. So don't do it at work when you're going to have phones ringing and people knocking on the office door. You know, maybe try and do it at a time when your children might be already asleep. But if your children come in during the interactive oral, that's fine. We're not concerned, but it can be hard for you. So it doesn't worry us. We're not going to be worried by that. But you know, sometimes it takes a minute for you to sort of get your head sorted again. So to be important for that. And yeah, and just keep it really friendly and really, you know, it is a conversation. We'll just go back and forth. And I think the good thing, again, in education, they're used to these conversations. So our interactive oral is a scenario-based interactive oral, and it's something that they would do in their everyday work, having a conversation with their director. So they're the teacher, and they're coming into the office to chat to me about a situation. And so it's quite a known conversation for them, and they're already most of them are already used to doing this. So I think that helps with a lot of the worry as well, that they do feel confident.
Wonderful. Thank you, Belinda. So many great tips and strategies from both of you. I'm going to go to you next, Emma, with a different question, but it's also about preparation. So can you describe something specific that you do to help your students prepare and feel ready for that supervised oral assessment interaction? And what prompted you to start doing that? Was there a specific moment or an experience where you thought, I should start building this into my practice? I'm just interested in what you do.
Yeah, so I suppose I've refined the way I prepare students the more I've done these assessments, because you know, you experience them too, and when you're in the assessment you go, okay, right, I've got to make a note to perhaps prep people on that. So for example, I find it's just really good to explain up front exactly why we're doing this, and you know, especially the authentic nature of it, to go, look, we're trying to prepare you for a profession, so it's not just about book learning, so to speak. You're going to have to be talking to clients, talking to managers, talking to stakeholders in many different areas that you might go into with these degrees. You know, if you're a lawyer, you might be presenting in court, but you're also going to have to be talking to clients. So it's about that kind of, you know, the learning through doing. So emphasizing that it's authentic. It's the kind of thing that's going to help prep you beyond just learning what the textbook says. So it's about what the value is. But I think it's also important to address the concerns up front as well. So this is the big thing, is it would be unusual for someone not to be nervous doing these, right? I mean, public speaking is a really scary thing. A lot of people are afraid of it. I know it's not technically public, but it is, you know, it's being evaluated on the way you present yourself. I suppose it's about saying, you know, you're going to have these experiences out in the profession where there's a lot more at stake. And so this is about a kind sort of environment to learn and practice how to do that. And I think it's also about explaining to them, we're not necessarily expecting you to, so for example, with the bail application, I'm not necessarily expecting you to do it as well as if you were in court, because you don't have the degree and the 2 years, you know, supervised training and then going into court, etc. We don't expect you to be at that level, but what we are expecting you to do is show that you're starting to understand how that works. And so I think it's also about, you know, managing the expectations, but saying it's okay to be nervous. And it really, the key thing is though that they have to be prepared. The challenge with an oral assessment is there's nowhere to hide, right? So if you come unprepared, you're going to be stuck, and we're going to be sitting there trying to fill the silence for 10, 15 minutes. And that's the hardest thing. And I know we've got some questions on that later, so I'll stop there. We can develop that thought later.
Yeah, wonderful, Emma. And I think your point about reinforcing the low stakes nature of this, but also concurrently that professional relevance is so important. Karen, I want to ask you from your perspective, like, are you maybe preparing students for this type of assessment differently than you did in the past? Like what's changed and why?
I think some students actually prefer it as an assessment task. Certainly lots of them do get nervous, but just making sure that they are familiar with the environment and practice. Some students even get uncomfortable speaking up in Zoom classes. So saying just before, like about low stakes practice in that way as well, like thinking about how they can speak up in a class. There's no right answer to say in a particular context, but they get used to communicating in this type of environment, or if it's at an intensive or something, that they at least feel a little bit comfortable before they go in that environment. So that I think is helpful. Knowing what to expect up front, that explicit communication with the lecturers, I think is really, the markers is really helpful, like in the room, like what is happening next, when can I expect my marks? It's okay to be nervous. You're allowed a little bit of pauses for thinking time. You don't have to rush kind of through the response that they have. But I think knowing what to expect in the form of models and what it might look like as a good response is helpful, like that, so they can visualize it a bit themselves, and how it might appear in a particular session as well. So even having a conversation with our team on Zoom, like how would you respond to like that practice, I think is really helpful for students, for anybody, but practice and familiarity and comfort in the environment is really important. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So even coming along and having a one-on-one session for you is almost a practice in a way for this oral assessment that will happen. Wonderful. All right, so I'm going to go on to the next question, and this one is for Emma first. Emma, can you tell us about a time when you've worked with a student or a group of students who were either unfamiliar with this type of assessment, maybe because of their educational background or their language or their culture or other factors? Like, what did you learn, I guess, from that first experience, and how has that shaped what you do now?
Well, I would say the majority of the students I teach have never done this type of assessment before. I teach 2 first-year subjects, and it's usually the first session first year. So again, so about emphasizing the authenticity, about practicing these skills. If you're particularly those who say, oh, I'm really scared of, speaking in public, I'm like, then the only thing you can do is take that head on and start practicing, because it's not going to get any easier as you move into the profession. So I think it's all about saying, what's the expression, feel the fear and do it anyway, or something like that. But I think it also tests us as professionals too, because we have to, it is a role play scenario, at least what we do is a role play scenario. So you have to think about, yes, you're evaluating the student, but you're also trying to make it authentic. So you're thinking about, okay, if this was in a workplace setting, so for example, in the upcoming assessment I've got coming up in a few weeks' time, I'm a senior solicitor in the public prosecutions, and the student is a junior solicitor, and they're coming to me and I'm going, look, can we have a look at the evidence here? Can we proceed with these charges? What's going on there? Now, if you're in the environment with a junior colleague and they're sort of stumbling a bit or they're not quite sure, you're not just going to be like, well, you've just failed. You can be, it's that the great thing is you've got the ability to kind of tease it out of them or give them some reassurance, maybe go, look, what about if we look down this pathway, and kind of, you can steer them a little bit. So it's not just about setting them at the edge of the cliff and pushing them if they fall off, if they don't get it right. And so it's all about sort of that, again, it's that to and from. And in a professional setting, that's how it would work in real life. Is you're not just going to be, well, I would hope that your most senior colleague wouldn't leave you stranded. So I think it's about thinking about that too as the evaluator.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Emma. That's a really great reflection on how we can draw on our own professional kind of expertise, environments, and experiences to shape our practice as assessors. So I really appreciate that point. Belinda, I want to go to you with that question as well, because you mentioned how diverse your cohort is. So, what did you learn from those first, you started in 2024. So it's, what did you learn 2 years ago when you started in this space, and how has that shaped your practice now?
Yeah, I think like what Emma said, it's not, you're not pushing them to the cliff edge. It's supporting them, it's prompting them, it's being aware how, and we tell them, we'll prompt you if you go off track, or, if you haven't quite answered something, we'll try and bring you back to it. I think learning how to prompt them without giving them the answers has been a learning curve for me. So, and when I moderate with my sessionals as well, it's saying don't forget, don't give them the answer, but prompt them, because often we want them to do well as well. So they might be talking about something, and we sort of prompt them and go, oh, and so you mean blah blah blah, and so it's refining that with the sessionals and myself to go, oh no, I have to make sure that I word it in a way that prompts their knowledge but doesn't give them the answer, I guess. And yeah, I think just making them feel comfortable was the biggest thing that we do. We're here to support you. When we're not going to, and if they're sitting in silence, we prompt them with more information as well. Like, well, what do you think about this? Or how would, how might you said this, what does that look like? Can you expand on it? So that there's not that sort of awkward moment. But I think a lot of the pre-prep helps with that. I'm sure Emma and Marissa do it as well, but we have a video of me doing an interactive oral on a different topic, and the students mark me, and that's hilarious to do with them, because then they're like saying, well, I'd give you a HD, and I'm like, but what about this, or what about that? And some of them like, yeah, you failed. And so you're building that, it's about collegiality as professionals together. It's not me as the lecturer. So yeah.
That is a great
answer?
example. That is just wonderful, and just building that trust, and as you say, building that trust, building that relationship. So you've gotten an HD, or it's great to get the students to practice their judgment as well around what good looks like, right? So there's another element to this, which is fantastic. Great tip there, Melinda. Karen, I want to come to you and to speak about, again, those students who are unfamiliar with this type of assessment. Again, there might be some equity considerations, or they might, have a different educational background. Are there specific things that you do with those students to support them? Are there specific kind of concerns that come when you're working with equity groups? Like, what's your experience been like in this space?
A lot of these things that are already being said, so like models, what does it look like? So clear expectations there, but also practice, that they really understand what they're going in for beforehand, so that they can prepare and learn the content well. So last week we were in Dubbo for the nursing students there, and over half of those students are international students. So reassuring as well, I guess, that the markers are focusing on clear meaning and answering the questions, not perfect English necessarily, that the markers are listening for understanding and clinical reasoning and professional communication. So what might that look like? That their accent is not a problem so long as it's clear. It needs to be clear and not speaking too fast, because that can make you not clear and that kind of thing. And just encouraging that simple, clear sentences are often better than complex ones. And I guess general things for international and neurodiverse students is not speaking in things like idioms, like pull your socks up or put your money where your mouth, like that, like being clear in terms of what you mean is going to be obvious to all people.
Yeah, wonderful. It's great to have that perspective as well, Karen, from what you do in your team to support students. And actually, we have our next panel session on Thursday, which is about how culture shapes assessment experiences, because there is it's not a neutral space, right? Assessment comes with these kind of expectations. So we'll unpack that a lot more on Thursday, but fascinating to hear your perspective as well today. I'm going to go to you, Marissa, with the next question, which is, can you describe a time like where things didn't go to plan and you had to kind of make a decision on the moment? Maybe the student was struggling, maybe there was that awkward silence, or it went in an unexpected direction, or you realized maybe your question wasn't landing as well as you hoped. Like, how do you handle that moment when you're there, in the moment? Can you talk us through that? What do you do?
Yeah, no, it's I think you've got to expect the unexpected first of all, and work out how you are going to present and stay calm for, because if you sort of panic, I guess that's not going to help the situation. But when I was thinking about this question, there's probably two types of student that I was thinking about. I was thinking about the student that freezes and just stops talking, and bunny in the headlights sort of look, and you think, is the camera frozen, or is it, are they okay? And then the other one that has so much to say, or is, and over talks, and you sort of can't get a word in to continue that conversation style of what you want to do. They're just telling you everything they know about something. So, like I said, I think the first thing is being comfortable with being able to sort of recognize what's going on for the student, that both of those could be a form of anxiety in action, and helping them to pause, reassuring them that, particularly if it's the student that freezes, the student that talks a lot, I think you've just got to be comfortable. And this was hard for me at the start because I don't like interrupting people, but you've got to be comfortable to interrupt and say, look, I'm just going to stop you there. And there's a lot of questions that I've got for you. And I'm really mindful of your time. If you've set up at the beginning that we've got 10 minutes to talk, and you're trying to be authentic and say, look, we're in a workplace, and, you need to be comfortable with doing that, first of all. So if you're like me and you don't like doing that, you've got to get used to that. And also perhaps warn them up front that if you go off on tangents, or if I think you've answered the question and I need to move on, I am going to do that. Okay, so don't be surprised if I do that, and don't be upset. We'll try not to be upset if I do that. But with the non-talker, or the person that's freezing, again, just reassuring them it's okay. Just take a breath. Maybe even, again, in that preparation time, talking to students about, these are some of the things that can happen in, where things don't go as perfectly as it, not so perfectly in the exemplar, because you want to maybe put a few things in the exemplar that aren't perfect. But these are the things that we might do. If you're the sort of person that does feel a bit anxious with speaking, how are you going to manage that? And breathing is one of those things that can be really helpful with anxiety in the moment. Even if they need to get up and move around for a bit and come back, reassuring them that they can take that pause, and that is part of an authentic workplace conversation, as Emma was saying. That we're not going to in a workplace, and if someone was like, oh gosh, I don't know the answer to that question, and that's often where students will pause and stop, is, oh, I don't know the answer to that. And you can say, that's okay, we've got time, just take your time, it's fine. And if they still struggle, having a few things up your sleeve of different ways to ask the same question can be, I've found, useful as well. I think they're the main things. The other thing is just making sure you've got a bit of a gap between sessions. If you're going to do, if you're setting aside a day to do your interactive orals or whatever, a block of time, don't run them one up like straight after the other. Just, give yourself a little bit of a window of time so that you don't feel pressured and, oh, I've got to get this student to keep talking. that can be helpful too. I think they're the main things that I jotted down.
Yeah, wonderful. It leads in really nicely to the next question, and I think we'll go to that. But what I take from you is about how you as an assessor needs to be not just reflective, like on the action, but in action, ready to kind of change tack and keep that interaction going. So great point, Marissa. I'm going to go to you, Belinda, with the next question, which is about how do you manage this and prepare yourself as an assessor? Because we know that it can be so demanding. You're listening, observing, taking notes, breathing, Marissa, like you're managing so much. You've got your 7 markers helping, you're thinking about all sorts of things. What have you learned in your years of practice around managing your own energy and attention and preparing yourself mentally and emotionally to engage in a day of assessment, if that's how you do it?
Yeah, so I guess having done it for a few years now, we've learned, and the markers, I sort of tell the sessionals as well, we don't do any more than 4 in a sort of sitting without a break. So it's a 10-minute interactive oral, but we block out half an hour for each interactive oral, just in case there's internet issues or they're late or something happens, so that we've got a bit of time. And so each one will be half an hour, and after 4, so a 2-hour block, I block out on the calendar so that it can't be booked. So we block it out so that there's like an hour break in between. I would say no more than 8 for me is the max I can do in a day without being a bit depleted. I have had other sessionals that can do 12. It's a bit much for me, but they kind of do it at different times. So we've got one marker that will often do, she likes getting up early, which works because we've got a cohort of students that often have early shifts or late shifts. So she'll do 5 till 7, and then she goes to work, 5 a.m. till 7, then she goes to work, and then she'll come home and do like 9 till 11. I don't know if I could do that after working a full day, but she is happy to do it. So yeah, how I sort of manage the sessionals and myself is 4 at one time, and then you need to have a break. Or if we know that we've got a student, so if they've got a plan, a study access plan, and we know that, like I've had a student that had a really profound stutter, and so we knew that we would need more time and she'd need to have more breaks. So I actually allowed an hour just to make sure that I had enough time, that we didn't have to rush, that she could take breaks, and that I wasn't feeling that pressure to get her through so that I could get on. I make sure I have water with me. I make sure I have can have food ready. It sounds silly, but it's all the things that you kind of, because it does take a lot of energy, and a lot of it's really enjoyable. It's a really joyful, meeting students and getting to know them, but it can be a little bit, I've talked all day, like I'm a bit exhausted. And
do you have chocolate?
Yeah, yep, have some chocolate ready. And I think absorbing a bit of their energy as well, because they're nervous. So you're trying to sort of, and coffee, yes, absolutely, have the coffee. You're trying to absorb a bit of their energy as well, I guess, to make sure that they feel calm. And so even though you're picking up on their energy, you're trying to remain really calm, and it's okay, and we've got time, so it is really, and we warn them before. So I'm going to be taking notes while you're talking. Don't be concerned about that. It's just so I can remember things. So we narrate what we're going to do so that they're prepared that, oh, why is Belinda writing? Is she writing something down? And it's like, I'm going to be writing while you're talking just so I can remember. It's for my memory, things like that.
Yeah, wonderful. Emma, I'm going to go to you with that same question. What do you do to kind of prepare, and what have you learned about managing your own energy and attention?
Yeah, look, I think Belinda raises some really important points there. It is really high level cerebral work because you're evaluating and you're performing, you're doing all these really high level tasks all at the same time. So, it is hard. It's enjoyable, but it's hard work. So, again, I think limiting the number you do in a day is really important. I think in the early days, we tried to get them done a lot quicker. And so I think in the first session, we also unfortunately, when I first marked it, we had a marker drop out for reasons at the last minute. So I just took on that marking, and I was doing 20 to 30 in a day. And I do not recommend that at all, it can be really draining. So I think also think about your expectations on yourself for what else you're doing in the day. So don't go, I'm going to do 8 interactive orals, and then I'm going to write 6 paragraphs on this paper. Be kind to yourself, and realize that you are doing that really high level work there. The tech stuff also, a lot of these are done online. I know some people do them in person, but we do it all online, and I just find that adds an extra layer as well. So I think, yeah, building in that time, building in breaks, I think it's really important. Getting up, having a stretch, and relaxing your brain is
Yeah,
really
wonderful. I'm mindful of time. I want to have a little bit of time for some interaction with our audience who've been here and following the conversation. So I'm going to go to the last question, right? Which is, and I'll go to you, Marissa, first, right? So what's something that you wish someone had told you before you did your first supervised oral assessment? Something that may have saved you worry or helped you do it better or made you just feel less alone in the process. What would you say that would be?
I guess I was lucky because the way that I met interactive oral was with a group of people, and so I'm going to answer it a little bit differently in that if you're looking to do interactive orals, try and team up with someone who's done them already, and practice with them. I think that I mentioned in the chat that Ruth and I had a go at doing an interactive oral with the community of practice, and our very first one was not an interactive oral, and it was the feedback we got from the community of practice was very kind, and then we did it again, and we did it much better the next time. So I think it's just practice, 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 and teaming up with someone is the things I would recommend to people.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's such a great point. And here we are already in this community. There's about 30 odd people on this call, some who are very experienced in this space. So, after this, if you are leading into this space and you're new into the space, reach out to one of your colleagues, reach out to the Teaching Academy, reach out to your fabulous educational designers who are there to support you in this space. So absolutely great point, Marissa. Belinda, I might go to you next. Like, what's one thing that you wish someone had told you before your first one?
So one of the things I was really concerned about when I first started was the number of sessionals that I had working with me, and I was really worried. We struggled to find enough markers as it is, and I was worried that I would input this assignment and then not have markers to help me, that they would not want to do it. And they love it. My sessional markers love it. And I've reached out to all of them after the first time. I've had them with me since 2024, pretty much the same group of markers, because they enjoy it so much. They feel like they get to meet the students. It actually helps their teaching motivation, like their intrinsic motivation to be markers, because they get to have that interactive oral with the students, and they really enjoy it. And the great thing about it is they also have those students in, because it's a first subject, first session, they have them, and then they see those students as they go through, they're marking their work in other subjects. And so for my sessionals, they're like, I love doing these interactive orals. It works so well for them. I was also worried about their workload in terms of if they're marking in my subject and other subjects, how it works. But because my interactive orals are at the end of the session, but before end of session, so the week 11 and 12, I think we do it. From memory, I'm trying to think. So not in the exam period. And they said it works out perfectly, because by the time all the other assessments come in for assessment 2 or assessment 3 to start marking, my subject's already completed and they're done. So they can manage their workload better as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my biggest worry, was sessionals and not having enough. And I haven't had that issue.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, Emma, what's your reflection in this space?
Lots of reflections, but I think really it's about, I love how each interactive oral is different, and it's all about framing it with the student as you would in any meeting with a person. Each meeting is going to be different. Written assessment is sort of finite when you get to it. You're not there on the journey with the student to produce that final piece. Whereas in this type of assessment, you're on the journey with the students. So, you know, I think it's really good. I find it improves my practice doing these assessments as well. Any other thing? Oh, look, and if anyone's looking for an evidence base as well, we also have, you know, myself and colleagues at the university have published in this space too, that provides an evidence base for the value of these types of assessments. So I know Meta's had a publication recently as well. So check out those resources. And look, you know, I'm always happy to talk to anyone. So if anyone wants to reach out and have a chat, it's been a great experience for me, and I constantly developing and learning in this space as well.
Yeah, wonderful, Emma. I will share your paper that you've published, which I'll share it in the chat after the session. Amita, your paper as well will be in there for colleagues to, because, you know, there is an evidence base, right? There is scholarly kind of work that sits under this form of assessment. So we want to encourage our community to lean into that as well as part of our scholarly practice. Karen, you get to have the last comment on this panel. What advice do you have for, say, people who are new to supervised oral assessment based on the feedback that you get from students about, you know, their experience in this space?
I think, like for markers, for students, that they can feel comfortable in the environment and with the learning that they need to do up to that. What does success look like, and understanding what marking criteria are, but also in the new context that they might never have done before, but also, I guess, modelling curiosity in the subject content and how you're going to apply that in different contexts, I think can be really helpful, because then it helps students become more active learners of their subject content, and it is an engaging way of presenting their learning, but yeah, to make them feel within that context comfortable with models and with practice is really helpful for anyone, but certainly students who have never done it before.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Karen. So thank you, panel. You are amazing. I have loved hearing your examples, your stories, your strategies and insights. Thank you so much for spending the morning with us. I have seen one question in the chat. I don't think there are any questions in the Q&A, so I do want to open it up to this, to our community here. I also want to shout out to the EDs who are on this call, because I think it's amazing that you've come along and you're engaging with this session, because no doubt you've made lots of notes, as I have, about some of these strategies and tips and tricks that we can then take in to our practice of supporting academics in this space. So I hope that you've also taken a lot away from this session. But I'm going to open it up in the last few minutes to see if people have questions. So please come off mute, put your camera on and put your virtual or other physical hand up, and we'll see whether we can get some questions going. Lachlan, I know you had a question around scaffolding. Do you want to come off mute and maybe ask that?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for all the panelists for sharing your experiences. Found that really great so far. My question, I guess, is around the delivery during the subject itself, as opposed to all the work that goes into the design process before you're actually in session, for example. So I've certainly had lots of different conversations with academics over time around what they considered a reasonable amount of scaffolding for a particular task, and whether that was recording an exemplar or running mock attempts, you know, for different things. So I'm curious to kind of get your take on maybe approaches to scaffolding for students before the main event, and whether there were kind of limits around what you thought was too much, not enough, things that maybe you thought you might try but hadn't done to date.
Happy to go to any of the panel around the scaffolding. Are there, you know, what is, I guess, practical and realistic to do in this lead up phase? I know you spoke about that a bit, Marissa, as well. Any further thoughts to what you had already shared with us? Emma, are you putting your hand up? Yes.
Yeah, but if Marissa wants to go first.
No, you go, Emma.
I was just going to say, well, I mean, we haven't done with every assessment, but we have done, you know, 2 assessments where they're linked. One is a written and one is an oral, and so scaffolded that way. And so you're asking something else. But what's really good about those is you can, or the way we've built it is, so this is, for example, in my first year criminology subject, they do the written assessment that's on the law reform, and you can give them feedback. So then you know that they've had the opportunity to really get across what the law reform's about. And then when we have the oral, we're asking them for an opinion, and using the evidence base that they've already kind of got more confidence on because they've had feedback on, or they've had the opportunity to improve where they didn't do so well. So you kind of not setting them up for failure. If they did badly in assessment 3, they got the opportunity to then go, because you can really target that assessment for assessment 3 at the feedback and go, you missed this point here, you might want to look at these resources before your assessment 4. So it gives them some agency in how to improve on that. And I suppose that's one way we've kind of scaffolded into an oral assessment. I don't know if that is kind of what you're looking for there.
That's a great example. I mean, and again, this is what we've talked about today. There's not one set recipe for doing this, right? And for each of your cohorts, your context, your disciplines, your subjects, you will sort of adapt and tailor even the way that you design and deliver over time. So that was a great example. Thank you so much, Emma. Gillian, you've got your hand up, and I think you want to, you've got a question there, but please come off mute and ask the panel. Oh, Gillian, we can't hear you.
That better? Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can.
Yes, you can. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm curious to know about tips for how to reduce the, I guess, the anxiety around selection criteria. I've inherited a subject this semester that has a supervised assessment, and it has very extensive criteria. The criteria is really quite onerous. When I first looked at it myself, I thought all the text that's in each of the different criterion is really quite extensive, and I'm thinking I probably need to reduce it down just for myself to be able to properly understand it all, and from a marking point of view, of course, but I'm thinking that in terms of student anxiety around it, yeah, if there are any tips that people could share, and also just keeping in mind too that I know you can't change the criteria, they have to stay fairly well as they are, for the purposes of being able to ensure that you're meeting the learning outcomes. So I don't want to change it too much, but I just feel like I need some tips on how do I make sense of this so that it's not too onerous for myself as a, you know, as someone inheriting the subject, but also for students in terms of reducing their anxiety.
Any thoughts from the panel? Gillian, before I actually go to the panel, I would say if you haven't already, potentially a conversation with one of our fabulous EDs in the Division of Learning and Teaching might go a long way in the sense making that you need to do. I think, you know, you're talking about how do I set myself and my students up for success. So I would highly recommend that you reach out to DLT and have that conversation. So please do that. Look, Nicole, yes.
Sorry,
One of our
just
fabulous
in.
EDs, come off
Hi.
mute, please. Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? All right. Hi, Gillian. I'm just following up on your question about the rubric thing. I did speak about that briefly in this PD session I did with Lachlan Kalash. I think it was on the 17th of March about, and I mucked around with chucking in an AI and saying what sort of questions could I ask potentially, just to get you thinking. Are you, and also of course, yeah, happy to assist further with that, because it all depends on the context and everything else. But just generally, that can be a good starting point to unpack that. But of course, if you are marking in a team, it's a really good opportunity to do that collegially. And then, of course, in the end, you can also then share some of the resources and the thoughts and that with your students, of course, sticking to that rubric, but saying this is what we're looking for, and this is how you can do really well in showing me what you've learned and show off what you've learned.
Wonderful.
Okay, thank you for
Great
that.
tips, Nicole. Thank you so much. We have gone 1 minute over time, so I'm going to bring this to a close and say to the panel, 2 of them have already left, but Belinda, Karen, Emma, and Marissa, thank you so much for being with us today and just sharing your story. I think I can see from the chat that people have found it so useful. You may get people reaching out to you after the fact now to have those professional conversations, potentially some of the EDs as well, to support people in that sense making process. But it's been wonderful. I've learned a lot. Thank you so much for being here, and to the to our great audience as well for joining us this morning. So bye for now, and I will share the resources that Emma referred to in the chat afterwards as well. So take care, everyone, and bye for now.